Hello, and welcome to another edition of Artist Spotlight. I'm Vicki Landon, the Administrator for Orange County Arts and Cultural Affairs, and I'm here with Peter Schreier, Program Director for the Photography Program at Crealde School of Art, longtime and recently retired Executive Director, Photographer, Instructor, Activist, Arts Administrator. Thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you, Vicki, for having me and for highlighting my newest project here.
Well, you've had a ton of projects in your
Yes.
life. Talk to me about when you first fell in love with photography.
I was still in school in Switzerland where I grew up. I had a father who was a very devoted amateur filmmaker and photographer, and I had a sister who was 10 years older who went to one of the very few, very prestigious art schools in Switzerland. And she built a darkroom in the basement of my parents' house. And I learned to work in there, and then when she got married, I inherited that darkroom. I was just the perfect age where the darkroom kept me out of trouble.
And then the rest is history, right?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, I had a wonderful teacher also in public school who did a big project with us, an early documentary project, very inspirational to me. He built a temporary darkroom at the school. And and then the rest is history. I went to liberal arts school, but the dream to become a photographer was always there, even so it wasn't totally encouraged by everyone. It was more seen by a lot of people as a hobby, to do that. But then coming to America, I made it a reality. Absolutely, never looked back.
And then when did you get involved with the Crealde School of Art?
The school was only 5 or 6 years old in the early 1980s. As a photography instructor, I became the head of the photography program. I became the program manager for the school, served under 3 previous executive directors. And then in 1995, the board asked me when they were doing a search, would I be an interim and maybe consider applying for the job, and I did. And again, the rest is history. It's a long story, but it's a good one.
But you still got to instruct photography even while also wearing the executive director hat.
I did, and I will never forget. This is amazing, okay? I ran into someone the other day locally who was on the search committee and hired me 30 years ago, right? And it kind of brought the memory back because they asked me during the final interview, so are you going to give up teaching and give up being an artist? And I said no. And there was a little bit of a setback of a shock, and I said, I will do my job, right? I will give up all my commercial work, right? And I will reduce dramatically my teaching. I'll give up being the head of the photography department, but I'll continue teaching and continue working as an artist, because I thought at the time, and I still believe that after 30 years of doing it, that it was an asset for the school, at least for the time being, to have a director who has also the trust of the artists and knows what it's like to be an artist, that competitive world out there, who knows what it's like to be in the classroom, but also, does the grant writing at the time. We had no help, and, and the business part, because I had a very good business angle education in Switzerland in the liberal arts school, and my parents had their own business. So that was not a foreign thing to me.
Right. But you're teaching different skill levels. So talk to us about the students and their skill level that are in this exhibit that we have here in the atrium.
It's a Wonderful Life in Kindergarten. Yes, of course. This is my 5th master class in documentary photography that I have instructed over the last 11 years. So I only do one about every other year, because while they typically are a 1 or 2 semester course, by the time you're done with it, from early promotion to completing it, framing it, exhibiting it, it pretty much takes 12 months, right? And it is typically the kind of program, there's a lot of prerequisites, right, that really involves the very best of our students at Crealde. And this particular project included several students who have worked with me on other master classes before. The one I did on the Santa Fe Trail in New Mexico, in St. Augustine, turned 450. But was also really neat, it pulled a couple professionals in. We had Patrick Connolly, who is a photographer and a writer for the Orlando Sentinel. He has a degree in journalism and photography, and he wanted to be part of a class project like this, which he had never done. And then we have a couple other people who who have impressive professional backgrounds, but never done a project involving 10 other photographers.
Wow.
On a particular place or community.
So it's this really intense experience. It's like a cohort program. You've
Yes.
got these really skilled photographers working together. Can you tell us a little bit about documentary photography and how that might be different as a specific skill?
As a documentary photographer, that's what I've done all my life, in my personal work and in my teaching. We're interested in the everyday stories of people and places. And we're interested in exploring how things are today, but then also looking at the history behind it. How did a community become the way it is today? How did a street, how did a building change its use, its purpose? And with people, who are they? And what are they doing now? What was their background? What is their relationship to their community, to their neighbors, to their job, to their trade? And that's really what I'm trying to teach. And these students have really taken this to just a fantastic level, working in Winter Garden. It's such a cool town. I have known it for such a long time. And
Is that why that's the subject of this particular class? Like, why Winter
absolutely.
Garden this
Yeah.
time around?
And also, Crealde has a great relationship with the city of Winter Garden. We do 2 exhibits at their public spaces, Art and Public Spaces Gallery at City Hall. It's a beautiful space. And this is where this project was inaugurated last November.
Very good. So with documentary style photography, there's a bunch of different subjects, right? Like you've
Oh,
got
yeah.
photos of like architecture,
Oh, yeah.
individuals.
Oh, yeah.
Like what's the breadth of the subject matter for this?
So we do a whole project development together in the beginning about if we're going to tell a story about a community the way it is today, what would that entail? What kind of people? How are we being inclusive and not missing someone, right? What kind of architecture is there? What's the history? What kind of businesses are there? And then I develop it into a list, and then the students get to pick their favorite topic. So if you're a participant, you have a couple topics that are only yours. That means that's your topic, but that means you also have to deliver. But then there is an open list that anybody can photograph. And basically, the best photo in each category gets to be in the show. So that's why typically each person has a minimum of a couple, maybe 2 photographs in the exhibit in such a project, but it is possible that you could have 4 or 5 if you hit several of those special topics and end up, and it's the winner. And there's never an issue that people really understand. People will really, in these review sessions, they will say, I loved my photograph, but now I see this one, I know that's a better picture. And sometimes in rare cases, I have to make the decision.
Oh no! When you have that open list of different options
Yes.
and topics, was
Yeah.
there one that was really popular that you saw a large number of students
Oh,
all
yeah.
want to capture?
Oh, yeah.
What was that?
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, in general, this is interesting, even with our best students, I have some people, they're just afraid of photographing people. They've been through the classes, they've learned how to do portrait, they looked at the masters, but they would rather be alone, quietly explore some interesting back alley somewhere, or go into some nature park or something like that. So a lot of times places dealing with the natural environment, with architecture, night photography is also very popular. A lot of people want to do it, but realizing that what some of the weaknesses are, I put in specific sessions as part of the class where we practice how to approach a person in a business to do an environmental portrait of them. How do you do the dialogue to break down the barriers? And how you do an interior photograph where you have to use a tripod and maybe some lighting or something like that. So we kind of, equalize it a little bit.
That's great. And what story are we telling with Winter Garden in particular in this exhibit?
So it's to tell the story about what is unique about living in Winter Garden today, which is so different than living in so many of the sprawling communities all around the greater Orlando, because it is a historic town. It's preserved the downtown area. It's where you can go for lunch, and as you walk down the sidewalk, you might run into the mayor or a city commissioner or somebody you haven't seen in a long time, because you experience people not from far away on the interstate, and you have so many of the descendants of the founding families of the city. They're still there too. You know, so it's a unique story to live in Central Florida, but to live in a town that has so much living history.
Well, thank you so much for sharing this history with us, for sharing your work and your
Thank you.
students' work with us here today. We appreciate so much you being a part of it.
Thank you for everything you do, Vicki. We appreciate it. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us on this edition of Artist Spotlight.